Ay, ay, la, la, la. Ay, la, 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 la. Ay, la, la, la. Ay, ay, la. Ay, alay, 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 alay. Alay, 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 alay. Ay, ay, la, 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 ay, ay, la, 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 ay, 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 la, 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 di, da, la, la, di, la, la, la. Shalom Aleichem, Ta'imiyah. And whoever's going to watch with us in the future, my mother and Katie and Vital and David and everyone else. Chaim. So this week we're starting a new lesson, Ezrat Hashem, Pei Aleph, 81. And you have it there, 81. And last week we were learning about davening and how if you bring in Mesiut Nefesh, self-sacrifice into the davening, then you can reach a higher place in the davening. This week we're moving on to the speech of tzadikim. So it starts off, Rabbeinu Zan potech b'pasuk she'amar Moshe Rabbeinu lemeraglim kodem she'alchu le'eretz Yisrael. Rebbe Nachman opens with the verse that Moshe Rabbeinu said to the spies before he sent them off to the land of Israel. Alu ze b'negev ve'alitem et ahar. You should go up by way of the Negev desert and then go up to the mountain. The mountain, I believe, is it's the mountain in Lebanon, but I think it's where Har HaBayit was. Perush Rashi, so you understand. He's telling the spies, leave the Sinai desert, go up through the Negev desert, and then to Jerusalem. Perush Rashi, a Negev hu psolet Eretz Yisrael. Apparently I'm still coughing. Oh Hashem, I must have had COVID or something like that. Don't worry, you didn't get it. I don't think anybody else in the house got it, but I've had this cough now for like 2.5 weeks or something. And if I'm at work, I'm fine. But as soon as I start talking, forget about it. Hopefully it'll be less than last time. Don't worry, whatever I had is gone. It's finished. You're not going to get anything from me now. I'm healthy, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so he says go up to the desert and then go up through the Negev desert, which he calls Psolet Eretz Yisrael. Now, Psolet in modern Hebrew is waste or refuse or garbage. You'll see it on the buses. I don't remember what the phrase is, Ein lasim psolet kan or something like that. Don't leave your garbage around. Psolet Eretz Yisrael, that's called the desert. Right, because it's like the wasteland of Eretz Yisrael. The nice part is when you come out of the desert. Sheken derech ha-tagrin shemarim et psolet tchila v'achar kach marim et hashevach. This is the way of, do you know the word ha-tagrim? Taf, gimel, resh. Tagrim?
The merchants.
Is that what it is? Could be, yeah, makes sense. By way of the merchants, that they first show, that's very good, thank you. They first show the bad stuff, and then they show the good stuff. So they're like, you'll want this, and you say, no, I'm not looking for that. Oh, you really want this? No, so I'm looking, so let me show you the really good stuff. So good job, how are you? Okay, so first they show you the bad stuff, then they show the good stuff. Achar kach tiru t'shevach. Sorry, where am I? V'chen amar lehem, and kach amar lehem, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu said to them. Tchila tiru t'negev, et shehu psolet. First you're going to see the Negev desert. You're not going to be impressed by the Negev desert, because it's like the garbage. ואחר כך תראו את השבח, and afterwards you're going to see the praise. אמנם יש להבין בפנימיות, but we want to understand this on a spiritual level, on a Hasidic level. מה ירמוז הכתוב, what is hinted at in what's written here, שיש תחילה להראות את הפסולת, ואחר כך את המשובח. That first we have to see the bad, and then afterwards we have to see the good. ודבר הזה יתפאר בדברי רבינו, and this is going to be explained through Rebbe Nachman. הטעם שהצדיק מדבר לפעמים עם המון העם שיחת חולין. The reason that sometimes a tzaddik speaks with the masses or the regular people in everyday conversations. הכלל הוא, the rule is, שהדיבורים של הצדיק מדבר בתורה ובתפילה, when the tzaddik speaks words during davening or learning Torah, נקרא בחינת ארץ ישראל. The words of the tzaddik are called an aspect of the land of Israel. והקשר ביניהם, what's the connection between them? כי ארץ היא בחינת נפש האדם. The land is connected to the soul of a person, כמו שכתוב, נפשי כארץ וכולי. As it's written in the pasuk here, it says, נפשי כארץ עייפה, לך סלע. Perush, that my soul is like a tired land to you. And the meaning is that David, he says, nafshi hit'ava lefa'alecha le'olam libli hafsek, that my soul longs for you, longs to do your will, forever without any interruption. Ke'eretz ayefa v'tzme'ah shemitave lemayim, like a parched and dry land that longs for water. So too is our soul that longs for our Hashem. So he says, he brings the quote here from Tehillim, Nafshi ke'eretz, and that's his proof that Eretz is connected to Nefesh. Hamivru'ar me'apasuk medame Eretz le'nefesh. Let's explain the verse that we just read, that land is connected to soul. The Nefesh hu b'chinat tibur, and Nefesh is connected to speech, kamo shekatuv, as written, Nafshi yatza midabro, that my soul came out through, that his soul, my soul came out through his speech. Hanefesh shel adam yotzet umitgalet al yedei dibur adam. Whatever a person is thinking in their mind or in their soul, that comes out through their speech. Shalom aleichem tizahava. Harei nefesh hi b'chinat dibur. And so nefesh is connected to speech. Ksha tzadik medaber Torah tfilah. So when the tzaddik speaks words of Torah davening, nikra diburo b'bchinat Eretz Yisrael. The tzaddik's speech is considered as if it's a part of Eretz Yisrael. Ki dibur hu nefesh, because speech is connected to the soul. She b'chinat Eretz, which is connected to the land. V'lachein diburim shel tzaddik em b'chinat Eretz Yisrael. So that's why the speech of the tzaddik is like the land of Israel. V'adiburim shu medaber im hamon am b'sichat chunin, and the speech that the tzaddik speaks with the public, with the masses, in everyday weekday conversations, unikra psolet Eretz Yisrael. That's called like the desert of the land of Israel, or the poor parts of the land of Israel. Ki af shekol diboro hu b'chinat Eretz Yisrael, even though all of the speech of the tzaddik is connected to the land of Israel, or an aspect of the land of Israel. Mikol makom leumat diboro b'torah tfilah. However, as opposed to his speech when it comes to Torah or learning, hasichat chodin shelo, his everyday conversation, hi b'chinat psolet Yisrael, is like the poor part of the land of Israel. Yiva'er madua tzaddik. Now he's going to explain. Okay, so we understand that when the tzaddik speaks, the tzaddik speech is like the land of Israel. But what if the tzaddik, somebody says to the tzaddik, so what do you think about Trump's war? And he says, I think that Trump is going to start the war again, or whatever. So you would say, well, that's not Eretz Yisrael. It's still Eretz Yisrael, but it's the desert of Eretz Yisrael. Meaning the tzaddik still maintains a high spiritual level, but is going to a lower part of the high spiritual level. Yiver madua tzaddik medaber sichat chulin למרות שהיא בבחינת פסולת. So why would the tzaddik speak everyday, secular, weekday words when it's connected to the poor parts of the land? ולמה אם כן מדבר הצדיק שיחת חולין שהיא פסולת? Why does the tzaddik speak these words if it's considered garbage? כדי לקשר את ההמון עם אל הדעת שהוא בחינת הר. Why does he do this? He does this in order to connect the general population of Jews to da'at, which is connected to har, which is connected to the mountain. So the tzaddik is saying words, like not words of Torah, in order to connect people to the mountain, which is da'at. So the mountain is Har HaBayit. What did we have on Har HaBayit? What was the great thing about the Beit HaMikdash? That we had da'at. We could feel Hashem's presence. Last week on the podcast, I told the story of Rabbi Tarfon. And Rabbi Tarfon lived to be, I think it said 80-something years old. And he served as, I think when he was 30 or 40 years old, as a Kohen in the Beit HaMikdash. And then the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and Rabbi Tarfon would talk about what it was to serve as a Kohen in the Beit HaMikdash, what you would feel there, what it was like there. It was quite an amazing thing. Like you can imagine the next generation, they want to know what was it like, and here was somebody that was there. It's kind of like today, people that met the Lubavitcher Rebbe and people that never met the Rebbe, and so people say, what was it like to be in the Rebbe's presence? So the same thing here. The tzaddik is trying to connect people to Da'at, which is Har HaBayit, which is the place where Da'at was most revealed. That was like the great chiddush of Har HaBayit, that you could feel Hashem's presence. And of course we know Chochma, Bina, and Da'at. Chochma is knowledge, Bina is understanding, and Da'at is awareness of Hashem's presence in the world. When you're on the level of da'at, so somebody can say, something bad happened, maybe God forbid something bad happened to you, and you can say, well, Hashem doesn't make mistakes, Hashem did this for a reason. We can use nikudot tovot and find the good in it, and through finding the good, we can achieve a level of da'at of saying, now I understand, or at least I think at this place and level in my life, I understand why Hashem did this thing for me. Before that, I would say Hashem did this thing to me. But when you have a level of da'at, you know that Hashem is doing it for you. So that's why the tzaddik is speaking these words. So the tzaddik, he can't just say words of Torah all the time. He won't be able to connect with everyone. But sometimes he has to say something. Somebody comes to, there's all these videos of people coming to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And people will say, Rebbe, I need a bracha for a child or something like that, and the Rebbe will give $2. And then they'll have two children or something like that. Now, and the Rebbe will say, bracha v'atzlacha, and the Rebbe will say, tell the doctors that they shouldn't be giving you this medication, they should be trying this medication. And no, the Rebbe should be speaking only words of Torah. So to say, tell the doctor to do this and not to do that, those are not words of Torah. And here in this week's episode of the podcast, I have a story of an Air Force officer that comes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, without him, I'm giving away a spoiler now, the Rebbe starts asking him questions about technical Air Force systems, that this was the only person that knew anything about them in the entire world. And the Rebbe knew them as if he had planned the systems himself. And he asked him questions that only later on, 15 years later, did he realize the Rebbe was giving him answers to solve his own problem with the systems. So now you would say, okay, why isn't the Rebbe just speaking words of Torah? Words of davening? Why isn't the Rebbe just saying Tehillim, giving over Chassidus or whatever? Because the Rebbe needed to connect this Air Force officer to Da'at. And in order to do that, he had to speak Sichot Chulin. What are you going to do? I'm trying to drink it down. And that is the equivalent of going from the desert to the mountain. The Gemara ein har ela beit hamikdash. In the Gemara it says there's no mountain except the mountain, which is the mountain on which the Beit HaMikdash is built. Shene'amar ahar atov hazeh ve'halevanon. That this is the good mountain and Lebanon. I'm not sure the connection with Lebanon. I guess the mountain was called Lebanon. Beit HaMikdash ubchinat da'at. So Beit HaMikdash is connected to da'at. Te'ita b'Gemara, zvad in the Gemara, kol mi sheyesh bo da'at ki'ilu nivna Beit HaMikdash b'yamav. Anybody that has da'at, it's as if the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, was rebuilt in their days. And now you understand why, because that was the space that we had da'at. So if you have da'at without the Beit HaMikdash, it's as if the Beit HaMikdash was there. Shabeit HaMikdash nitan bein shtei otiyot, that the Beit HaMikdash was given between two letters, bein shnei shemot Hashem, between two names of Hashem. Shene'amar pa'alta Hashem mikdash Hashem, vedat nitan ben shtei otiyot. Now, pa'alta Hashem mikdash Hashem, how do you translate that?
Hashem, you worked or you created.
Yeah.
Like a pillah.
Maybe like the Mikdash of Hashem is the place where we do the work of Hashem. Pa'alat Hashem, Mikdash Hashem. You don't have it there.
So maybe also the work of Hashem is the Mikdash of Hashem.
That could be also. Okay. As long as we figure something out, as a group here, we're good. Vedat nitan ben shetiyot, and dat was given between. So first we had the Beit HaMikdash was given between two letters. I guess Pa'alat Hashem, Mikdash Hashem. That's Hashem Hashem, and dat was given gam dat nitan ben shnei shemot Hashem, between two of Hashem's name. Ki kel daot Hashem, because he is the God of knowing Hashem. I guess the kevan sha'adat Ibchinat Beit HaMikdash, and since that is connected to the Beit HaMikdash, the Beit HaMikdash Ubchinat Har, and the Beit HaMikdash is connected to the mountain, Nimtza, it follows Sha'adat Ibchinat Har. Then that is connected to the mountain. V'lachen, a tzadik tzarich ledaber sichat chulin im hamon ha'am, and so the tzadik has to speak words, everyday words, with the regular people. Kedei lekashram el hada'at, to connect them to the level of da'at. Like the example that I gave with the Rebbe that would give advice and all kinds of things like that. Ki al yedei Torah tefillah, because through Torah and davening, shezeo dibur mekudash, which is holy speech, b'bchinat Eretz Yisrael, which is connected to the land of Israel, levad iyavshar lakashram and shosham. If you're just speaking words of Torah, you're not going to be able to reconnect people with their source. Because they're far from the true speech. Right? Somebody who's really connected to Torah and is on a level of da'at, the Rebbe wouldn't have to say these words. He would just be able to quote words of Torah. And we have conversations like that recorded as well, where great scholars or other Rebbes would come to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they would come like with a question. Doesn't it say in the Gemara that this? And the Rebbe would say, well, if you look at this, then you see this. And he says, but this means this. And their whole conversation is Torah, but the Rebbe is actually saying something. And then they'll say to the tzaddik of the Rebbe afterwards, they came to speak with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, so what did you get out of that? And he says, I understood now that I had a student in my yeshiva that I wasn't giving him the proper attention, but because the Rebbe showed me where it says in the Gemara that this thing that I was struggling with is actually there, then I understood that this is what I'm supposed to do for that student. There are many conversations like this, and if you just watch the videos online of the Rebbe and all these meetings, and I really don't watch many of them, I just watched them in the past for many years, then you'll see that the Rebbe is able to speak words of Torah and give over a message only through words of Torah. But for the regular folk, he has to just say it straight out. Don't do this, do that, and that's what connects people to da'at, because when they see that the Rebbe was right, they have da'at, but they got it through the Rebbe. Because they're far away from the true speech, which is the speech of Torah and davening, straightforward words of Torah without having to twist them. However, when it comes to everyday conversations, there the words are not straightforward. You have to twist them in order to bring out words of Torah. And so they're not given over truly like in a pure way, as if words of Torah. And the proof that we have to twist the words of Torah for somebody who's far away from the truth, De'ita betalmud talmai hamelech malchi Yavan. It's brought, it's also in the Gemara, Megillah, Tet, about Ptolemy, the king of Greece. Shehoshiv shiv'im v'ushnayim zkenim lichtov lo sefer Torah. It's a well-known story that he brought together 72 of the great Torah sages to have them write a Torah scroll. And we know that they wrote they rearranged the letters of the Torah, right? Did they write it in Hebrew or they wrote it in Greek? Do you remember? Oh yeah.
I believe they translated.
Bikesh miziknei Yisrael letawgem lo et Torah leYavanit. Yeah, he asked them to translate it into Greek. So I guess everybody there was fluent in Greek. V'katvu kulam Elokim bara bereshit. Instead of bereshit bara Elokim, which is how the Torah really starts off, they wrote Elokim bara bereshit. And we know that he put them in 72 separate rooms, that they weren't allowed to talk with one another, and they all knew that if they said Bereshit bara Elokim, that in the beginning Hashem created Hashem, then he would think that Hashem didn't really create the world, that there is more than one God, and so they had to twist the words. B'makom ha'tziruf shel Torah Bereshit bara Elokim. Instead of the combination of words, it says in the Torah that in the beginning it was created by Hashem. And the reason why they had to change and to reorder, because Ptolemy was far from the truth, so they had to change the order of the words. Et seder tevot shel Torah, the order of the words. Kadei shelo ya'amar talmei shekatuv b'Torah shebereshit hu elokut, so that the king of Greece would not say that Bereshit was actually Hashem or a God. V'arishon barat hasheni, and the first created the second. Ve'shtei reshayot hen. And they're two separate sources. Right? Because if you read it the way that it's written, Bereshit bara Elokim. Who created Hashem? Bereshit. So who's the most powerful one? Bereshit. And you could also say, Bereshit means the first. So the one that came before Hashem is the one that created Hashem. But they knew that, so they wrote, Hashem created Bereshit. So that Hashem's name would be first. Kach ha-tzadik, and so it is the tzadik, peush, meaning, kamo shenahagu chochmei Yisrael im talmei, as the wise sages of the Jewish people behaved with the king of Greece, kach noheg ha-tzadik im hamon ha'am. So too the tzadik behaves with the general population. Ksher rotze lekasher et hamon am ha'rechokim min tzirufei Torah amitiyot el hadat shebetorah, when the tzaddik wants to connect the general Jewish population that are far from the words of truth to the true words of the Torah and bring them to the da'at of the Torah, tzarich ledaber imahem tchila sichat chulin. First you have to speak straightforward, secular words. Ulalbish behem haTorah behelem. And you have to hide the Torah in a veiled way. Shebe'emet mitzad tzadik hadibur hazeh hu Torah. That as far as the tzadik is concerned, this speech is connected to the Torah. Rak shu medaber b'tzerufim, but he's just speaking at a roundabout way. Right? When the Rebbe says, use this medication, don't use that medication, as far as the Rebbe was concerned, he was speaking words of Torah. But the way that we heard it is advice for the doctor. Dahainu, that is to say, shehu hofech et tzerufim shel Torah letzerufim shel sichat chulin. That the tzaddik is taking the words of Torah and twisting them around in a way that they come out as secular words, weekday words, everyday words. V'nimtza, and it follows she'atorah mitlabesh b'sichat chulin, that when the Torah is enclosed in everyday conversation, v'adibur kazeh heim yicholim lispol mechemat alavush, and the speech, right? So the words of the Torah that are being given over in a twisted way in order for somebody to receive it, they're able to tolerate this being enclosed, in quotes. Aval be'emet hem shomim Torah. But the truth is, they hear Torah, meaning the words that are giving over, they know that they're words of Torah, and the person receiving it, they might not be aware of it, but they're hearing words of Torah. And through this, they're brought to the level of da'at. There was a story I told in the podcast, I think I told it here. There was some guy, this was in the early days of Lubavitch, and there was the son-in-law, there were two sons-in-law of the Rebbe Rayatz, of the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe's widow wanted, like the previous Rebbe's widow, wanted the other son-in-law to be the Rebbe and not Menachem Mendel, who became the Rebbe in the end. And I forgot his first name. Gur Aryeh was the family name. And he had no problem with the Rebbe being the Rebbe. He was a chassid of the Rebbe. There was, as far as I understood, there was no jealousy or anything. The guy was a tzaddik in his own right. By the way, that's the reason that Chabad doesn't wear shtreimels. You see that the Frierdiker Rebbe had a shtreimel, everyone before him had shtreimels, and then all of a sudden the last Lubavitcher Rebbe didn't have a shtreimel, because the mother-in-law, who was the widow of the Rebbe Rayatz, would not give the shtreimel to Menachem Mendel because she didn't want him to be the Rebbe. She wanted the other son-in-law to be the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said, no problem, I'll just keep wearing my hat. And with that, he saved millions and millions of dollars for Chabad Hasidim, although they do pretty well, spending money in other places. Okay, so the story is that he went to collect money in Chicago, and there was a wealthy donor who had a heart attack, and he was unconscious in the hospital, and they asked the rabbi to come, and he said, let's call the Rebbe. They called the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, if the family gives $1,000 to the Lubavitch Yeshiva, then he'll have a full recovery. And if not, prepare for the burial. And the family didn't like this, and they were upset. And the son-in-law, like the other son-in-law, Goraryeh, he tried to convince them. He said, listen, if the Rebbe said to give the money, and your father will have a full recovery. In the end, the doctor said, that's it. No, nothing more we can do. Plan for his death. You've got, half an hour, whatever it is. They took out the money. They called and said the money's been given over, and the guy woke up. The guy woke up, he had a full recovery, and the doctor said, it's impossible. Now, this is what I'm talking about here. And like I said, I told the full story. I told it here, I told it on the podcast. What is the Rebbe doing? Like the Rebbe, why would the Rebbe do that? The Rebbe doesn't have to speak these words. The Rebbe should have said words of Torah. The Rebbe should have said, Hashem will bless this man with a refuah shlema, or quote something from the Gemara, or something like that. But no, what was the Rebbe doing? The Rebbe knew that the Rebbe had the power to bless. And the vessel to receive the blessing was the $1,000. But it wasn't about the money. It was about giving this family da'at. After that, I guarantee you, nobody there had any doubt that God was running the world. That's what da'at is. Not the doctors, not the family, not anyone. And that's the goal of the Rebbe. So sometimes the Rebbe, most of the time the Rebbe is giving over words of Torah or davening, but sometimes people need a shot to the system. They got to get hit over the head, and so he gives them da'at in this way. And that's the meaning of the Rebbe speaking words of everyday conversations. But as far as the actual conversations, they're really words of Torah. They're just there to connect the people. And by the way, on Shabbos I read another story, which eventually I'll tell on the podcast, of a similar thing where this woman was pregnant and the baby was turned the opposite way. The feet were down and the head was up. And they can twist the baby around in the womb. They weren't able to do it. They told her she had to have a C-section. She said she's not going to have a C-section. She's going to call the Rebbe. They told her, if you don't have a C-section, you and the baby are going to die. And the Rebbe said, do not have a C-section. Tell the doctors to check again. They tried one more time. The baby turned around. She gave a natural birth. One of the doctors became Shomer Shabbos on the spot. Now, you understand that the reason that the Rebbe did that was so that doctor could become Shomer Shabbos on the spot. There's just so many stories of this. But now we have an explanation from Rebbe Nachman, who's saying, well, this is why we, the Rebbes and the tzadikim, this is why we do this. That's why we have these conversations, to bring people mikashrim ladat, that connect them to God. Venikra hadibur b'sichat cholin psolet Yisrael. So when they speak these words, it's called the psolet, the poor or bad parts of the land of Israel. Ki av shem psolet eretz, psolet hadibur, even though it's a lower level of their speech, the lower level of the land, afan pichen yesh behem Torah. Still the words of Torah. V'hi b'chinat kedushat Yisrael, it's on the level of the holiness of the Jewish people. Yive'er, let's see, we'll just do this one little paragraph here, then we have another small one, and then we have a summary from Rebbe Nachman. So we'll do that next week. We'll just do this little section here. יבאר כיצד ההשגה הזו מרומז בפסוק שבו פתח רבינו תורה זו. He's going to hint at where this comes from in the verse that we opened up with. וזה פירוש הפסוק, and this is the meaning of the verse. עלו, go up. היינו שאתם המון עם עולים מהמקום הרחוק שאתם נמצאים, להתקשר אל הדעת שבתורה. That is, when Moshe Rabbeinu said to the spies, עלו, go up, it means that he's connecting the general Jewish population from the distant place that they're at and connecting them to the Da'at and the Torah. Ze b'negev, ze b'pchinat tzadik. When it says, so we're talking about the verse that we opened up with. Ze b'negev, ze is the tzadik. K'mo shekatuv, sof davar kol nishma. As it's written in the end, it's all heard. Ele Elokim ye'u v'et mitzvotav shamu. That in the end, you'll understand it, you'll keep Hashem's mitzvot. Do you want to translate it a different way?
One more time.
Sof davar kol nishma, et Elokim ye'u v'mitzvotav shmo.
In the end of the day, everything will be understood.
Ve'elokim ye'u, sorry, and you'll fear Hashem, ve'et mitzvotav shmo, and you'll keep the mitzvot. So in the end, you're going to get it. Ki ze kol ha'adam, and so because ze is everyone. V'dershu Rabbeinu Zichron v'chan, sage of blessed memory, said, shekol ha'oleh, kol ha'olam lo nivra, ela latzevet lazeh. That the whole world was created in order to serve this. L'shamesh et tzaddik, to serve the tzaddik. Shezoche leirat shamayim u'lekiyum ha'mitzvot kara'oi, that merits to have a true awe or fear of Hashem and do the mitzvot properly. Right? Like these stories that I told today These are all people that are serving the tzaddik. How nice for the tzaddik that the family didn't want to give the $1,000. Even if they gave it right away, but all the more so. They're serving the tzaddik. They think the tzaddik is helping them, right? Here's the father, he's on his deathbed. He says, give $1,000, we give $1,000, he recovers. Who helped whom? They actually helped the tzaddik. Because now they're going to go around and say, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said to do this, and help more people to connect to the Rebbe. Hainu tzaddik hu b'negev. That is, the tzaddik is in the desert. Hainu psolat Eretz Yisrael. That is the refuse of the land of Israel. Kepirush Rashi anal, as Rashi said above. Hainu b'chinat sichat chunin. That is everyday conversations. V'al yedei zeh yechol lekasher etchem et ha'amon ha'am. And through this he can connect you, the general Jewish population. V'al yedei zeh hu mavi etchem leb'chinat v'alitem et har. And through this he will bring you to going up to the mountain. Hainu adat. That is having the awareness of Hashem Hanal, as mentioned above. Shekain har hu b'chinat Beit HaMikdash. That the mountain is connected to Beit HaMikdash, which is connected to Dat. V'lachen sherotzeh tzaddik lekasher ot ha'amon am le'emet b'Torah. When the tzaddik wants to connect the general Jewish people to the truth in the Torah, tzarich mitchila deber sichat chunin. He has to start off by saying not words of Torah davening. Shehi tzirufei haTorah ha'ofchim ha'rechukim me'emet. That are a mixture of the words of Torah that turns them around because they're distant from the truth, mat'iim lehamon am, and fits them to the general population. V'haTorah milubeshe b'tzirufei elu, and the Torah is enclosed in these words. Mekadeshet otam u'mekerevet otam el tzaddik, and it raises them to a higher level and brings them closer to the tzaddik. Okay, so now I'm going to give a short story, B'ezrat Hashem, of somebody that I never heard of before. Rabbi Avraham Matasiyahu Stefanesht. You heard of him? Huh? He is from Bucharest, Romania. Pretty good. Okay. Have you heard of him before? He died in 1933. So he was apparently like the biggest tzaddik in Romania. And he died before the Holocaust, look at that. Wherever he would go, it says there would be thousands of people, Jews and non-Jews, just following him around. Like he was on such a high spiritual level. But you also have to remember that people back then were more connected to the land and to holiness in general and spirituality in general, the further back you go. So apparently every year he came to Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania, and all the shops and businesses closed, while tens of thousands of people lined the streets to welcome him. But despite that, he was considered a true hidden tzaddik of his generation. He lived to 85 years old, and he never once taught Torah publicly, and he never wrote anything down. So here you have this guy that's like this great Torah scholar everybody knows. He's like this shining tzaddik, but he didn't give any public lessons. We don't have any Torah that he wrote down. He didn't want even one Torah thought said in his name. And when he was learning in his private study, he wouldn't let anyone into the room. And when he was finished learning, he would carefully put all the books back on the shelf exactly the same way, so nobody could see what he was learning. This is one of his things. One time, the only time that he was caught with the book that he was learning, so there was a fire in his house. And he was sitting in the room, surrounded by the fire burning on both sides, covered in smoke and soot from the fire. And somebody broke into the room, and the Rebbe was sitting there learning from this book. His face was totally black. His whole body was black. And they said to him, Rebbe, there's a fire. And he looked up, and he said, And he came out of the house. He was totally oblivious. And what was he learning from? Sefer Raziel HaMalach, which is apparently a very difficult Kabbalistic book. Let's see. So there are all these little stories of him here. So He was doing Kiddush Levana one time. He went out into his backyard, and just across the road was a large division of tanks that were preparing for a training exercise, and they didn't tell anyone that they were preparing for a training exercise, and they started shooting off their cannons, and the cannonballs or missiles or whatever are flying over the heads of the Hasidim, and they ran for their lives while the Rebbe stood there jumping up and down during Kiddush Levana, not even aware that there were tanks in front of him. They knew that when he davened Shachrit, it would take him an hour till they got to Baruch She'amar. So from the opening, I don't know if he started a Hodu, it doesn't take long, it takes like 3 minutes, even less. It depends how fast you daven. It could take you 30 seconds. It would take him an hour. So everyone would be, getting ready, waiting for the Rebbe, and then they would start davening with him. And only afterwards, one of his attendants bring him the only meal that he ate once a day. He'd take a few spoonfuls, and then the shirayim, the leftovers, were handed out to the Hasidim, who says there were many miracles. One of the miracles is there was a chassid that came. This guy had a daughter who had typhus, and she was very sick. And the doctor said only a miracle could save her. So the Rebbe said, give her a piece of my bread and feed it to her with my spoon. And the spoon, she of course had a full recovery. Like she hadn't eaten anything in days, but when she got the Rebbe's food, she couldn't stop eating. And the spoon stayed in the family until today. There was a person that once came over to him, and he had several elderly daughters to marry off. And he said, since the Rebbe is the most righteous of the generation, and in our sages say that the tzaddik decrees and God fulfills, I beg the Rebbe that he promised that my daughters will be married off this year. And the Rebbe looked at him and he said, what, you're saying that I'm a tzaddik? And you're saying that I'm the tzaddik of the tzaddik hador, I'm the tzaddik of the generation? He said, do you know what it means to be the tzaddik hador? So this guy realized he made a mistake praising the Rebbe. So he said, even if the Rebbe is not the tzaddik hador, he knows who is, and therefore I give my note to the Rebbe that he should hand it over to the tzaddik of the door. So the Rebbe liked this, and he gave him the blessing, and within the year, his daughters were healed. One more thing here. Let's see. So he had these, this is really interesting. So he had these two great Rebbes that were his students. One of them was the Ribnitzer Rebbe, who died in 1995. And another was Rabbi Eliezer Zusha of Portugal, who became known as the Skulena Rebbe. The Skulena Rebbe. So he passed away on the 21st of Tammuz in 1933. And it says people fainted in the streets when he passed away. And in 1969, they had to move his body out of Romania. And they moved it to Tel Aviv. He's buried in Nachalat Tzadok in Tel Aviv. And so what's the difference between 1969, that's 36 years. 36 years after he died, they say the body was pure like the day that it died. It hadn't decomposed or anything. It's pretty wild. There are stories of Nazis discovering graves like this as well, because they were convinced that there was treasure hidden in the big graves of the tzadikim in Eastern Europe. So there you go. Zchuto yagen aleinu. We should be protected in remembering the great tzaddik, Rabbi Avraham Matasiyahu Stefanesht, if I said that right. And Ezat Hashem, all the things we're davening for, he should hand them over to the tzaddik of the generation. Shkoyach to everyone.